I have a little bit of further news after our news yesterday, and a little bit of some stories about Bishop Louis Vangeke. So you're with Mission Alive, it's Roger from the MSC Mission Office, and the mission goes on. First of all, a little bit of news from Sister Rita in the Sudan, and she brings news that the first of her current 4 wells has started at a place called Vangeke, which is rather remote from where she normally is. So there's Sister Rita and the people from the village and the beginnings of the work there. So that's good to see. We also have, I want to tell a couple of stories about Bishop Vangeke. Louis Vangeke, as I mentioned before, he was the son of a sorcerer, and I think his mother was not the chief's first wife. He was down the line a bit, and anyway, he was adopted a bit by the mission, and he went to Ulola, became one of the little brothers of Jesus, where he took vows, and then he was encouraged to think about the priesthood, because even at that time Bishop de Beaumanoux was concerned that we begin to nourish and promote the native clergy, the people, priests from the people. So, and Louis did. So he went to Madagascar. And these are some pictures of him, a bit of a collage that I've done for Louis. That's him in his ordination a bit later with Bishop Alain de Beaumanoux, and one of him looks a bit midlife, something there. So this is the man, first Papuan priest and the first Papuan bishop, and that was quite remarkable. So he was educated in Madagascar, as I said previously too. He could already speak French, having lived, a lot of his life with the French. He had his own language, Mekio. He probably spoke Roro and maybe, Police Motu, and who others. A lot of Papua New Guineans are and were at that time very apt with languages. So Louis was no exception to that. And of course, when he went to the seminary, he would have learned Greek and Latin. So a couple of stories about him. Some years ago, but many years after Louis died, I met in Wewak on the north coast, the New Guinea north coast, a brother from Madagascar. I forget which congregation he was. And I said, "Oh, Madagascar." And I said, "We had our first priest trained over there." And he said, "Oh yes, Father Vangeke, Bishop Vangeke. We know all about Bishop Vangeke. He's a legend in Madagascar." So quite famous just for the fact of going there. So there was one part of the story. But when Louis came back to Port Moresby, he was a complete oddity. There was no native Papuans educated to the degree that he was. He's probably better educated and spoke more languages than most of the Australian administration in Port Moresby. But there was a rule. There were rules about the natives. They were not allowed to wear shirts. They were not allowed to drink alcohol. And there were probably others. Now the one with the shirts, I think it was a practical reason. They weren't used to wearing shirts. So when they would get wet in the rain or something, they wouldn't change the shirt. So the shirt was wet, and resting on their chest, they could easily get pneumonia. So it was a practical thing for that. And they weren't allowed to drink alcohol. So here's this guy. He comes back from Madagascar, very well educated, and as our photos show, wearing a full black suit and a shirt and all the rest of it. So many in Port Moresby of the expatriates, the Australians, what do we do with this guy? He's well educated, he's a priest of the church. They didn't know where to fit him in. And talking about we have to change the rules or something. Now the governor at that time was Murray, who was a very good Catholic and a very good friend of Bishop de Beaumanoux. So when Louis, the young Father Louis Vangeke, was saying his first Mass in the cathedral, the governor waits until the young priest is processing to the altar. He was a rather tall man. He strides up to the altar rails and says, "Excuse me, young Father Vangeke, would you hear my confession, please?" And he turned aside and strode off down to the back of the church to the confessional. So the young Father Vangeke went down and heard the governor's confession and came back and proceeded with Mass. So in one stroke, the governor, Murray, said without words, he said, "This man is a priest, we treat him as such." Interestingly, Bishop de Bomenu then posted Louis way up to one of the furthest areas of the diocese at the time, up in the Cooney country, which is up from where I was at Kabuna and Bakaudu, right up there to where the people had not yet heard the good news. And interestingly, years later, that little area there, they somehow Louis was moved out from there, and it was in between one lot of people and another lot of people, so I got caught in the middle, and the mission went the other way around. And it wasn't until my time at Tarpini that I went back there and baptised those people. And there was a little book there where Father Louis had been putting the roll call for instructions for baptism. And I said, "What about these people?" And they looked at it and said, "Father, all these people are dead. They're all gone." So in one sense, I finished the work that Bishop Louis began. So there's a little story about Father Louis, all part of our mission, him becoming a priest, bishop, and him going on with the mission. And he was a great missionary in his own time. Thank you for being with us.